For this week's press conference about the day. Chairman Gates is going to start us off today, starting the conversation about security, tabulation update, and what voters need to know as Election Day approaches and what is going to be happening on Election Day. Also, Recorder Stephen Richer with us today again, and he's going to tell you about voter turnout so far. And Elections Co-Director Scott Jarrett will have information about emergency voting, what that means here in the state of Arizona, and what that means for voters here in Maricopa County. Also, Election Day preps that are going on right now. And we will get to your questions and answers right after that. If there's anything we can't answer, or it's more of a technical question, or we need to do some research, we'll certainly get back to you by phone call, email, something like that. If you have a question, please just let us know. Jessie up here, she has a microphone. We want people that are watching on YouTube to be able to hear your question. So please use the microphone whenever you ask your question. Let us know who you are, what organization you're with, and then we'll do our best to answer your question right here. And finally, if you represent a Spanish organization, we have Cecilia here, and she's here to answer questions either after or during the press conference. In the question and answer period, we can also answer questions in Spanish. So with that, I would like to introduce Chairman Bill Gates, Chairman of the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Fields. Appreciate it. And we're really proud that elections are run as a team here in Maricopa County. So, of course, we have our recorder, Stephen Richer, and then the entire Board of Supervisors. And today, I'm thrilled to see my colleague, Jack Sellers, who represents the East Valley, with us today. So, Jack, thanks for your partnership, and thanks for being here. I'd like to start today by talking about a topic that, again, we didn't used to have to talk about. I wish we weren't talking about it, but that's election security. And I'm talking about the security of those people voting and those people who are our elections workers. And I just want to give a sincere thank you to all of our law enforcement partners, federal, state, and local law enforcement, including our sheriff, Paul Penzone, for their fantastic partnership. Sheriff Penzone in particular has spoken very passionately about how he and his deputies are going to keep all of our voters safe, and I thank him for his efforts on that front. And I just want to reiterate that message to make it very clear that if there's anyone out there who intends to disrupt this election over the next 6 days, that it's going to be responded to very strongly, again, by those of us here at the county and by our partners and other law enforcement. The focus should be on letting the candidates make their closing argument over the next few days to try and encourage those people who haven't voted yet to vote for them, and not to be thinking about issues like security of our voters. And finally, I wanted to say thank you to Judge Liberti for his ruling last night regarding poll watchers. So he has, through that order, I think, demonstrated the importance of maintaining the security, again, both of our voters and of our elections workers. And we do appreciate as well some of the groups involved in that litigation have stipulated to making changes in what they're doing so that they can still exercise their First Amendment rights while ensuring the security of all of our voters and our elections workers. And in fact, since we started talking about this topic a couple weeks ago, we are seeing a downtick in the number of people who are hanging out at these at the drop boxes. So I think that's a positive thing. Next, I want to talk about results a little bit. The tabulation process has been going very well, thanks to the folks over here and others on the team. We're now up to 516,000 ballots that are ready to be reported. So that's a result of a great amount of work already. And I want to be clear that even though the media may decide to call a race at a certain time, the counting still goes on past November 8th. And state law requires us to be as diligent in the process after the media may have called the race as it was before. So that relates to everything, all the checks and balances that we've talked about previously, because every single vote must go through the same process, whether it's an early ballot that has signature verification, to ensure that all of these votes are being counted properly and the sanctity of the vote is being protected. So unfortunately, we've seen some fairly influential people on social media over the last day or so starting up another false narrative again. And this is the narrative that Maricopa County should have all of its ballots counted by the end of Election Day, within a few hours of the polls being closed. And this is a false narrative, and it's a dangerous narrative, and we're going to continue to push back against it. First of all, there's no state or voting jurisdiction that gets the voting done in this country on Election Day. So, I mean, it's simply false. But in addition, as people know, we've had mail-in voting here in Arizona since the early 90s, and because of the fact that people drop off thousands and thousands of early ballots on Election Day at the polling place, we then don't even start, or our partners at the recorder's office don't even begin with the signature verification until the next day, until November 9th. So it is a blatantly false statement, but unfortunately I think we're going to keep hearing it. So that's why we're going to push back on it and continue to talk about the truth. And in fact, what our record shows is that Maricopa County, in the time that it takes Maricopa County to tabulate all the votes, actually compares quite well when compared with other jurisdictions out there. You know, the only reason this has become a big issue recently, and the time that it takes to tabulate all the votes, is because our races are so close. And that may or may not happen next week. But if it does, and if we hear that narrative, we're going to continue to push back on it. And finally, as we look forward to Election Day, so those people who like to go and vote at our vote centers on Election Day, some things that they can do now to get prepared in advance. If they should look at their sample ballot, and if they do look at that sample ballot, they'll see that there are like 80 races or more. So there's a lot of races here, a lot of things to vote on. If they want to start doing some research, maybe on some of the propositions or some of the candidates, they can start doing that now to make the process more efficient on Election Day. We also want to encourage people who show up on Election Day to please bring their ID with them. Make sure they have that now. And then finally, take the time to check where the closest location or the most convenient location is. We're going to have 223 vote centers across Maricopa County. As we've been doing recently, folks can vote at any one of those vote centers. So by making a little bit of a plan in advance, will allow Election Day to go better for those people who are going to vote on Election Day. And with that, I'll turn it back to Fields.
Only briefly, though. So I'd like to introduce Recorder Stephen Richer as if he needs an introduction.
All right. Thank you very much for coming back here. All right. I'm Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer. Nice to see you all again. I'm going to give just a few reminders, and then I'm mostly just going to read off statistics, which is going to be fun for me because I like statistics, and hopefully some of you have already seen some of these on our various social media outlets. Reminder that if you have your early ballot and it is already voted and it's in its green envelope and it's sealed and it's signed, and that's all wonderful, but please do not mail it back through the United States Post Office at this point because that is their recommendation. They said mail it back by yesterday, so that gives it 7 days to get to the elections facility such that we have it 7 p.m. on election night. Because again, as we've said before, we are a receipt state. So instead, drop that ballot off at either one of our voting locations. We currently have 56 vote centers open, or at one of our 13 drop boxes. 11 of those are inside government facilities, 2 of those are outside of our facilities in Mesa, and outside of our facilities down just a little bit south of here at MCTEC. You can go to any of those, you can find any of those at locations.maricopa.vote, and that remains true for the remainder of the week, and of course as we go closer and closer to Election Day. Also, today is the last day to upgrade your status if you are a federal-only voter. So if you take a birth certificate or your passport or your tribal identification and you had previously registered, you'd shown proof of identity, you've shown that you exist, but you had not shown proof of citizenship yet, then you can upgrade that such that you can receive a full ballot. Today is the last day to do that. Tomorrow is the last day to do that, so please be aware if that is something that is applies to you, but that only applies to a few thousand voters in Maricopa County. Thank you. All right, statistics. As of 11:38 a.m. today, we mailed out over 1.94 million ballot requests for early voting ballots. We have received back 821,622 early voting packets. For the Republican Party, that's 307,000 approximately. For the Democratic Party, that's 310,000 approximately. Libertarian, 4,000, and other, about 199,000. We have completed signature verification on 774,000 of those packets, roughly. Historically, that lags a little bit behind 2018. But yesterday was a big day, and it looks like today is going to be a big day as well, so we are catching up with those returns from 2018. Just yesterday, we had the third highest number of returns in a single early voting date. This included 109,000 by mail, 17,000 by drop-offs, and 3,000 in-person early voters. As of Sunday, so 2 days ago, 92% of the ballots that we had received back had been through the mail, 7% had been through drop-off, 1% had been through in-person early voting. We assume now that the mail option is no longer available that the other two categories will begin ticking up and up and up, and of course we expect and are ready for a significant election day. Regarding correspondence, as you all know, we've made it a point of pride to respond to your correspondence, to answer your questions as quickly as possible. We have received over 34,000 emails to our voter inbox since the beginning of the election, since this beginning of November election. 41% relate to early voting, 14% relate to voter registration, 14% relate to election day questions, 12% relate to different media that the office has done, and so on and so forth for some smaller categories. We have received over 30,000 calls to our STAR call center. We are still averaging a wait time of less than 2 minutes. That's something that we hope to maintain through the election day and after. The Cardinals are 3-5 and last in the NFC West, and the Suns are 6-1 and are in first in the Western Conference. Other statistics that you undoubtedly care a lot about. I think that does it all for statistics. And please return your ballot by dropping it off if you have not already mailed it back. Thanks, gang.
If you're writing those all down feverishly, they will be on the recording, and you can go back and check everything. And I'm sure Recorder Rich will provide those as well. Scott Jarrett has a number of updates for us as well today. He is the Director of Election Day Operations. And Tabby.
Thank you, Fields. And do we know, is DeAndre Ayton playing against Portland this upcoming weekend? No.
Still tending that injury.
Yeah.
But DeAndre Hopkins is playing for the Cardinals. Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us today. So as the chairman and the recorder highlighted, there are several options still available for voters to be able to return their early ballot or vote in person if they've not done so already. We do have 2 more days of in-person early voting, and based on the last several days, about 2,000 to 3,000 voters have been participating early each day. Our wait times have been 0 in all of those days, and with 50 in-person early voting locations continuing through Friday, I expect wait times to be very low for the next couple days. So early voting will end at 5 p.m. on Friday. And then state law does recognize, though, that voters may have an issue that would prevent them from being able to vote in person on Election Day. So in complying with Arizona state law, Maricopa County will be offering some emergency voting locations. So we'll have offering 43 emergency vote centers that will be open on Friday, November 4th from 5 to 7 p.m. Well, then on Saturday, November 5th, we'll offer 48 emergency vote centers that will be open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then on Monday, we'll be offering 128 emergency voting locations that will be open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That 5 p.m. is when state law does say that emergency voting ends. And then we'll transition just 13 hours later, opening up our 223 in-person vote centers on Election Day. So as of yesterday, we were 97% hired at our voting locations. So I do want to just take the opportunity to thank all of the temporary workers that come out to support the elections department and help us serve Maricopa County voters. It really is a really good cross-section of who we are as Maricopa County, not only from a political party perspective, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Independents, but also from a community perspective. It's our families, members, it's our neighbors, it's our friends that are all working at our different voting locations to be able to serve those Maricopa County voters. So as we go into Election Day, the Elections Department has been preparing for this election, upcoming election midterms, for well over a year. And one of the things that we start to do, and we first start with when we're preparing, is making estimates of voter turnout, so we can have reliable enough sufficient resources available to serve voters. That's the number of voting locations, but also making sure our supplies and equipment that will be ready to serve. So one of the things that we did early on is make those estimates, and we projected it to be somewhere between 1.4 and 1.9 million voters that would be participating in this midterm general election. Now, we made updates as we got closer and closer through that cycle. So as we got to May, when the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and the Recorder approved our early voting election day plans, we identified that range of voters, and then that's when we started making those preparations for the number of supplies and equipment that we would need. And based off the statistics that the Recorder just mentioned, just over 800,000 returns already, we project that voters will probably be somewhere in that range of 1.4 to 1.9 million voters. So, but when we look at Election Day and you think about the hundreds of thousands of voters that will be participating, there could be lines on Election Day. Lines are normal, but we encourage voters to go out to our locations.maricopa.vote website. They'll be able to find not only the most convenient location from a geographic perspective, what's close to their house, or maybe what's close to work, but also from a wait time perspective, that shortest wait time that will work for them. So the other thing is that in Maricopa County, we've mentioned that we're going to have 223 vote centers, so voters can vote anywhere. But that also means that we're going to have more check-in stations than we've had ever before. So 1,900 check-in stations. This is 400 more than what we had in 2020. It also means that we'll have over 5,000 voting booths for voters to be able to cast their ballots. We'll also have over 675 ballot-on-demand printers, as well as over 400 precinct-based tabulators at our voting locations. But preparing and being able to administer an election is much more than just writing down a plan. It's being able to respond if that plan doesn't go according to plan. So contingencies, and then what are those contingencies if the contingency doesn't work? So some of the things that we've been working through is making sure that our poll workers are able to respond to issues that they may encounter as they serve voters on Election Day. They are the face of the organization, and we want them to be able and ready to serve those voters. And that's through in-person training as well as computer-based training, so then they can get that refresher from home after they've attended that in-person training. It's also establishing partnerships with our law enforcement agencies. So if an issue does arise that our poll workers can't solve themselves. It also means that we're hiring our poll workers and community members, creating those partnerships with the political parties if for some reason we have some of our poll workers quit in those last few days, and making sure that we're able to backfill those positions. But then also being able to support those poll workers from a technical perspective. So in addition to the 2,300 poll workers that we'll have at our voting locations, we're going to hire over 100 technically trained staff that can respond to if one of our check-in stations goes down, or if we need to replace the toner in one of our ballot-on-demand printers that will be out at our voting locations. We also do robust stress testing on all of our equipment. So that stress testing could be anything as simple as finding out, all right, how many voters can be served by a single ballot-on-demand printer? And at what point in time do we need to replace that toner? And that's really once it gets to 40%, a level of 40%. And at that point in time, we know that 800 more voters can be served by that printer once that toner gets to that level. But it's also about ensuring that voters have the information that they need so they can choose how to participate in the election in the way they want. And as the chairman opened up his statement with, one of the best resources for voters is to go to Be Ballot Ready. They can get a copy of that sample ballot. They can find out what voter ID they might need to go to one of our voting locations. They can find location information. If they have questions about security, they can see our security videos. So lots of great resources on BeBallotReady.vote. With that, maybe we'll turn it over and answer your questions.
All right, thank you, Scott. So let's, Jesse's here. She has a microphone. Sasha, you want to get us started?
Hey everyone, Sasha Huffle with the Arizona Republic. I'm wondering on that court order, obviously Chairman Gates, you thanked Judge Liberty for putting down that order yesterday. Do we have a sense of who is enforcing that order? And I know that I spoke with the reporter about this last night, and it seemed that it was not going to be elections or the reporter's office, so I'm guessing law enforcement.
Well, the two actions that were filed in the federal district court are both civil actions, and so they would be enforced by the parties themselves. And no government entity was named in either of the actions, and so they could be enforced by the parties themselves or by the federal district court. Now, the first case, Judge Liberty declined to issue the temporary restraining order that was a broader writ against observation, presence at these different voting locations or at the ballot boxes. The second case was brought against specific defendants, and it was enjoining them from specific practices, and they stipulated to an agreement whereby they wouldn't show up within 75 feet. They would post certain things to their website, and so as I understand it, it is specific to those defendants and their associates. As mentioned, we're not in the business of enforcing the law at the recorder's office, so any reports that we do get, we send up to the police department and we send up to the sheriff's office, and then they will take any necessary actions for a follow-up.
And then, so my other question is, I talked with the sheriff's PIOs this morning, and they said to me that they were doing a legal review. So is there no option then of them?
Well, I would, of course, wait to defer to them in their legal review, and I guess I'll see what they say as well. But so any reports that come in of any sort of intimidation or alleged intimidation, any sort of voting problems regarding actors who may be acting unlawfully, we immediately forward to law enforcement.
Basically, it's in relation to the court order yesterday. I just want to get your initial reaction and your hope that, even though it is specific toward Clean Elections USA, that again the order will, kind of send a message to the community that you want people to vote peacefully, you want people to be able to not feel intimidated. I just want to get your initial reaction to that. Overall, your thoughts on it.
I mean, it's the wish of everyone here and everyone in the county that everyone be able to vote free of any intimidation, free of obstruction, and of course we've taken a lot of steps to make sure that happens, whether it's 223 voting locations or the multitude of places where you can deposit your ballot even right now. And so we believe that we have done that. Sure, we are disappointed when we believe that people are behaving in a reckless manner that isn't necessarily, it doesn't aid the system in any way, and there are very real ways to get involved in the process that can be beneficial, whether by volunteering as a political party observer or as heck working with us. So we discourage practices that aren't geared towards a productive means, but we also appreciate that this country has a rich history of protection of the First Amendment, that political speech is an important element of our political discourse, and we defer to Judge Liberty and in the federal court system to determining what that delineation is.
And then also, what is your level of concern for Election Day with people perhaps camping out outside of
We feel great. We've been prudent. We're certainly aware that this has had heightened emotions over the last 2 years, but the Sheriff's Office has mobilized a small army towards the election administration, and so we feel that we are very well prepared, and I think everyone feels confident, and I think that our workers, whether temporary workers or permanent workers, feel valued and safe as they should.
Got a question back here in the back.
Yeah, Rich with 12 News. Based on your projections of voter turnout and Republican voters' slow ballot returns, how many voters do you expect to show up at vote centers on election day?
Scott's the man with the numbers here.
So I won't provide a specific number, but that range could be somewhere in the 250 to 350,000. And with our projections of 223 vote anywhere vote centers, that should be sufficient to be able to serve those voters. Again, if there are lines on election day, I'd encourage voters to go to that locations.maricopa.vote and then find that shortest wait time or that most convenient voting location for them.
Is that your, is that higher than your projections as you plan staffing?
That's right in line with the projections that we planned for.
So my question is about when you guys get complaints of voter intimidation, is there a certain bar for which you guys forward those to law enforcement, or are they just shot? Do you have like a certain bar for which those are moved over, or is everything just automatically forwarded to them?
I don't know. Do you have anything else to add to that, Recorder Richard? I think he explained it pretty thoroughly. Yes, anything that comes in, the recorder's office is not a law enforcement agency. Obviously, the board of supervisors is not as well. And if it's a complaint about a voter intimidation, it goes on to law enforcement. They can work with the county attorney's office or whatever the appropriate agency is to determine whether it was truly voter intimidation. Sasha. Sorry, Yvonne.
Former colleague.
Yes, former help. I'm wondering, are you guys preparing for lines on election day? I mean, it sounds like that's something that, you mentioned was normal, and I think that it also came up that the ballot is quite long. So are you preparing for lines on election day, and how are you preparing to keep those wait times as short as possible with about 80 contests on average on the ballot for Maricopa County voters?
I think Scott's probably the best to answer. I know he's lost a lot of sleep over, really crunching numbers, as you've seen. So please, Scott.
So part of when we established this plan, we anticipated that there might be a reversion back to some election day voting. Right when we went to 2020, that was a lot of voting in some of concerns, and what transitioned to early was because of the pandemic. So now that's why we expanded the number of voting locations from 175 to 223. That's a 27% increase. We go through and we identify where those potential bottlenecks might be within the voting location, whether that's at check-in. So we have 8 check-in stations at every single voting location, so voters can get through that smoothly. We've expanded the number of printers in all of our voting locations up to 3, so that can go through and be faster as well. We have upwards of 25 to 35 voting booths, depending on the number of check-in stations. So to allow those voters that have that lengthy ballot to be able to complete that ballot and give them the time that they need, but also not create a bottleneck. And then the last piece to that is we have 2 precinct-based tabulators in all of our voting locations, right? So that doesn't end up being the bottleneck. And then if there were to be any issue with any of those processes, we have redundancies in place. So we have that technical team that can go out there and respond and be able to get that voting location back online if need be. So with all of those resources that we've deployed, we're confident that we'll be able to serve voters on election day. Yes, and we have plenty of paper to be able to serve voters. So we're sending out 1,800 sheets of paper to every single voting locations. We have hundreds of thousands of paper that will be at our supply depots, as well as additional paper at our warehouse, so we can respond and make sure that we have enough paper to serve voters on election day. And the 1,800 reason is because we had very few voting locations in the 2020 presidential election that exceeded 1,500 voters.
Yvonne.
Thank you for doing this. Just to try to get ahead of what the rebuttal may be on this after Election Day, GOP returns are down thus far compared to 2018. What is the rebuttal going to be that somehow election officials are to blame or the media is to blame for, calling a race before it even happened, for example. What is the response to a coordinated, aggressive message from Republican activists that somehow Maricopa County might be to blame for this gap between the 2018 returns among Republicans and what we're seeing thus far?
Go ahead. All right.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
I'll let the chairman take a stab at this
Yeah,
one.
and I'll let the recorder add. I don't see how Maricopa County has any responsibility for it. In fact, I think the Republican Party has been encouraging its voters to vote on Election Day. So I think they have sort of, which is fine, and I want to be very clear, this board, we have, as long as I've been here, pushed very hard for our voters having the opportunity to vote in all different ways, whether it's by mail, whether it is in person early or in person on Election Day. So I don't think that there's anything that Maricopa County has done, either at the board level, at the recorder's level, that would cause that. And I think, in point of fact, it was starting to catch up now anyway. Aren't we seeing those numbers, seeing less of a gap? But regardless, I think the rebuttal is that we're not involved in that in any way. We've encouraged voters throughout this to vote in whatever fashion they choose.
I would just point out that this was, we have been outspoken about this since before the primary, as far as what will be tabulated when and when you can expect, and different sort of voting behavior patterns and whatnot. But if it mirrors the August primary, then it would be 70% would be available right at 8 p.m., another 12-13% by the end of the night, and then those early ballot drop-offs would then be the tail on that. Depending on how many early ballot drop-offs there are on election night will determine how significant that tail is. I think we've all been very transparent about this. We've all been very forthcoming about what the process is, and we're not in the business of telling political parties how to participate, like which method is better. We're in the business of telling people how they can participate, and obviously many Arizonans continue to choose to vote by early ballot, but we could see an uptick in voter day participation, which, as Bill said, is fantastic. And they all count. They're all wonderful. We love them all. We just count them at different times.
Follow-up question. Assessing all of this, taking a 30,000-foot view at where we are right now, taking into account the drop boxes, the controversies there, and the successes there, the plans that you have for election day that you're working towards for clearly a year. How would you assess the state of democracy right now in Maricopa County?
Strong.
I have my opinion, but you're not seeking my opinion. So, Chairman Gates.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Richer. It is very strong, and I think that we're seeing people participating. We're seeing when things are occurring that some consider intimidation. You're seeing others come back in, as opposed to having, we had a couple interactions in the parking lot, but for the most part, people have been dealing with this appropriately, going to court if they feel that's the way to go. I'm proud of how our citizens are engaged, and although I'm saddened by the fact that, but a lot of these people are from outside of Maricopa County anyway, but they continue to spread misinformation, and that's why we're going to continue to get the truth out. We appreciate the media getting the truth out. So I think so far so good. But again, we've got 6 days left here, and as we've talked about a lot, democracy is a fragile thing. That's why we treat it with such care. That's why other elections officials do across the country, and we're going to continue to do that. And those who would behave as bulls in a china shop as it relates to our democracy are not on the side of democracy. And again, I would ask for them to turn the temperature down and let the ideas win out, and let those with the best arguments and ideas and proposals to be successful in the elections.
Mary Jo.
I wanted to elaborate a little more on the automatic recount. If there are multiple races that trigger an automatic recount, are those done? Is that recount done
Scott?
Yeah, so if there are multiple contests that would trigger that automatic recount, they would all occur after the Secretary of State canvasses their election. So that'd be, I believe that's December 5th. But then if there are those multiple, we'll do that recount simultaneously. So we'll have to go back through the logic and accuracy test and then program the equipment. It has to be on the exact same equipment that we used in the initial count, but then it'll just be programmed to just count those contests and then report the results for those contests. So if it's 4, we'll be tabulating those ballots, scanning them through, but then just counting for the 4 contests that were affected. Or if it's 3, it'd be the 3.
How long do you estimate that would take?
So it sort of really depends on how many contests that are part of this and how many ballots that would need to scan. But most likely, if it's more than 1 or 2, then we'll need to rescan all the ballots again, and that could take upwards of 8 days just to do the scanning of the ballots. The logic and accuracy test from the Secretary of State, that could take a few days. We have talked with them, and we believe that would be first on the list to have our logic and accuracy tests completed. So after that court orders, after the logic and accuracy test, we believe 8 days for the scanning, and then there will be, after a rescanning and tabulating of the ballots, then there'll be a hand count that would be required. That hand count is only if it's a federal, a statewide, or a legislative contest that was part of the recount. Yeah, because Maricopa County uses a vote center model, it will be a 2% of all the ballots that are being recounted for that contest.
I was just wondering, is there a specific hotline available for either the public or poll workers on election day to call if somebody sees something or there's something unusual present or call in a problem, or the poll workers?
I should know this number, but I know the recorder's office and the team, they take a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails. What's the phone number, Ray? Or the recorder? Surely somebody up here remembers it.
Well, we have multiple phone numbers. We have some that are specific for our poll workers that are isolated for them intentionally. Obviously, we don't want to clog those. So that number is provided to those. See something, say something. But for the public itself, our call center, as the recorder indicated, and the chair, that our times, it's the 602-506-1511. So that would be for the voters to make any, if they are looking to make any calls in with regards to any question they may have on Election Day.
And I think it goes without saying that if it's obviously a law enforcement matter, if it's an emergency, it's 911 or a non-emergency number to the local police. And I'd like to clarify something earlier too. We're talking a lot about our partnership with MCSO and the sheriff's office. Sheriff Penzone was at an event with the chairman and the recorder yesterday and talking a lot about this. They are not going to have uniformed officers at every vote center. In fact, you probably wouldn't know they were there if they were going to be there. But they are going to be out and about to make sure things run as smoothly as planned by all these folks and the plans that were approved. And they'll do their best to keep that in check. But certainly we're not trying to have some sort of armed presence there that might keep some people from voting. So, Yvonne. Oh, I'm sorry. I got one question back here. I'm sorry, I didn't notice.
Republican voters are being told to wait in line at voting centers. Do you believe there is a strategy in place to create an image of disarray at voting centers?
If there is Chairman Gates, you have something?
Yeah. So I sure hope not, but I'm happy you raised that question about the lines, because it has been unusual in the last couple of elections that we really haven't had lines. And so if we do have lines, again, you've heard the plan to keep those as limited as possible, but if we have lines, it's not a sign that Maricopa County has failed in running its elections. I'm anticipating that could be a possible narrative, and so we push back on that. We wait in line for the movies. We wait in line for the grocery store. Again, we're going to do everything that we can, not only to keep the line short, but then we have the technology to help move people with our 223 different vote locations and keep those lines down. But if that's their effort, I think it's again, it's another example of trying to disrupt an election. For what purpose, I have no idea. This is our democracy for all of us. And if they're doing something like that, they're damaging the democracy for this country. It's a non-issue. It should be. But if we see it come up, we'll push back on that one as well.
Just real quickly, what's the status of hiring of workers and then the status of the RMC litigation over that issue?
So we'll go to Scott Jarrett first, and I think Recorder Richard, you have something to say?
So I'll just provide the update on where we are with our hiring of poll workers. So we are, as I mentioned earlier, 97% staffed at our voting locations, and the partisan breakdown currently falls at 926 Republicans, 931 Democrats, and 420 that are either party not declared, independent, or libertarian.
You just heard that out of a group of over 2,005 workers, differentiation between registered Republican workers and registered Democratic workers. So that should give you a sense of where we're at and how meritorious any lawsuits challenging the process should be. The first lawsuit is a garden variety public records lawsuit. We've been producing records. We will continue to produce records. I'm very proud, actually, of the public records request team in the recorder's office. We have turned, hopefully you know, Yvonne, that we turn records requests pretty quickly, and we'll continue to do that. And when we had a hearing in front of the judge, judge said, this looks like it's working its way out, and keep on keeping on and keep on producing those records. So that's a nothing burger at this point. As far as the second one, that's proceeding as ordinary civil litigation would. If we have to move forward, we will. It would proceed. We haven't had a discovery conference yet, but we would proceed to discovery, and we would file any motions that we feel are necessary. But this is a bipartisan process, and that's about as bipartisan as it can come. Our recruitment efforts have been bipartisan. We have encouraged everyone at all stages of the process to get involved, and still to this very day, if you have questions about the process, we'd love for you to be part of the process, and that continues to be our message. We set the same standards for every single worker, regardless of what your political affiliation is, and so there's no grounds for alleging otherwise.
Back here in the corner.
Thank you. Sean Whelan is my name from RTE Irish Television Service. A question for Chairman Gates, if I may. You may have heard this from other correspondents as well, but I'm interested to know how you feel about foreign correspondents like me being dispatched by news desks on the other side of the Atlantic to come down here to Maricopa County, to rummage around in your electoral system and see is it up to spec. How does that make you feel? Use the word rummage.
So first of all, welcome to Maricopa County. And, as someone who's lived here since the 1980s, I'm very proud of our county. I love that all you guys are getting to see us. Good time of the year to come out, by the way. Our weather is perfect, so that's wonderful. But, I have talked to a lot of reporters in the past few weeks from around the world, and it has had a big impact on me, actually, because it's made me realize that this isn't just about our country. We understand the eyes of our country on Arizona and Maricopa County in particular, but it's made me realize that the eyes of the world are on Maricopa County, because America has been, as the longest lasting democracy in the world right now, the rest of the world looks to us as a model for democracy, and we're very proud of that. I'm certainly proud of that. And so it concerns me that all of you have come here with, I think what I hear is that there is a real concern that there's something wrong with our democratic republic, and that Arizona is almost, and Maricopa County is is a place where this sort of battle is taking place on, you know, the truth versus misinformation. So it reminds me of the importance of all this, but it concerns me and it frankly focuses me that we have to continue to do the right thing because the rest of the world is watching, especially those democracies around the world, or maybe even those countries that aren't democracies but hope to become one. And if they say, if America, they can't get it right, why would we think that we could in Kyrgyzstan or Belarus? And so that's why, you know, again, I think this entire team understands the importance of it, and again, we welcome you and hope you stay a while you're here.
Can I go off on a rant?
Is it a real rant, or?
Yeah, semi. I of course echo everything that Bill has said, and I mean, really being part of this county has been so wonderful because everyone has stood so steadfast by everything that Bill just said. But democracy, we're not only having a conversation about democracy, but we're having an epistemological crisis in many ways that is focused right here in Maricopa County, where we can't even discern anymore what a solid, objective truth is. We're not talking about what's the right minimum wage or what's the right policy setting goal for this particular preference. We're talking about basically is 2 + 2 = 4, because if you can't accept election results after all the tests, after all the professional audits, after all the court cases, after Mark Brnovich gets on 60 Minutes and says this is all horse, you got it, then it ain't never happening. So I really worry about that, and I worry about that in multiple contexts, and I think that it has really come here to the elections arena in spades. And for that reason, I think that one of the things that we have been hopefully among the best in the country at, and this event represents that, is just relentlessly pushing back against these falsehoods, because we firmly believe that truth can be known, and if we say enough about the process, that people will understand, and we as a society can have a shared set of facts.
Might have stifled all conversation after that. Are there any other questions? All right. I'm not going to go through the auction here. So thank you very much for being here today. I think you heard a lot in many different ways about why we find these press conferences valuable, why we decided to do this particular time around. We know that we've already seen it, as Chairman Gates and Recorder Richer alluded to, that some people are starting to say things that to us we're going, well, of course there's an explanation for that. But then you see thousands and thousands of shares in social media, and you wonder, why are people believing it, sharing it, talking about it when we've already explained it? But we'll do this again. But now Mary Jo has a question because I talked for too long and I should have shut it down. So let's talk about that. That's what I was getting to. So no, we will be here on Monday at 1:30. We'll have another press conference, and we welcome you all to come here. I know we have a number of other crews that are coming to town as well, so I expect we'll have a full house perhaps. So please get here on time or early, and then we're talking tentatively about one on Thursday of next week as well. Wednesday, we imagine this team over here will be exhausted. You guys, as many of you know, they work well into the night, into the early morning hours of the 9th after this particular election. So a lot of these people will be very, very tired, including some of my team as well. So we'll make sure we can regroup with clear heads and talk soundly about where we are in the process. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys being here.